Welcome to the Bender Continues podcast. Joining us is the backbone of the TBC operations and unfortunately, our dad joke aficionado. Where there's a will, this guy will find a way. No matter the circumstance, he is someone who's always been there when the people need him most. At the drop of a hat, he will do whatever it takes to be necessarily there to support you and support someone in need. Today we have a moment where we can reflect, where this man has had our back. Please welcome James LaGamma. Our discussion today.
Golf clap.
A little golf clap.
Our discussion today will take us down the rabbit hole of a pretty serious matter, which is mental health. A topic that can be controversial at times, however, more educating and more coming to light as we resonate in today's society. How the mental health and the strength of the mind can be as important or perhaps more important to the one's physical health.
So join us as we discuss James's experiences from managing the day-to-day of a collegiate student athlete to the stresses that come with working in the ever-changing mortgage industry, and touch on the obstacles we have all faced at one time or another in everyday life. So get comfortable, grab some popcorn, and prepare for a discussion on how perspectives and mental outlook keyed success for a member of the TBC family. The Bender Continues podcast presents Embracing Life with Mental Fortitude, the James LaGamma experience.
Oh. Wow, mental fortitude.
Big word.
Well, I can give you a little mental fortitude with kick us off with a dad joke here.
I'm a fan.
Ready for this, fellas?
Yep, I'm here for it. I need to.
What did baby corn say to mama corn? Where's popcorn?
That's funny.
I thought you were going to go
See, we're
with
starting off with a laugh,
you going
with a
with
joke
muffler.
here. Nah, that one's getting retired, I think. It's a good one, but we'll save that for another one.
Is that your go-to?
You actually did one off a whim. You did one off a whim a couple weeks ago, and it was pretty good. It was in the studio, and I forget what it was, but it was actually pretty good.
I tend to do stuff off a whim, actually, more often than not. I have a repertoire of dad jokes, but it's hard to call to them, and
Is that what keeps you stable?
It is.
You get a real serious situation, you're able to kind of pull yourself back with a good dad joke or two. It just kind of balances you out.
Hey, that's what it is, man. Sometimes you just got to spread some laughter.
Honestly, so
You think it calms? You think it calms the I guess the setting? A good dad joke.
It definitely can change the mood real quick.
yeah.
I've gotten a lot of looks. They're usually just shaking their heads, but I'll get some laughter, and people are like, "All right."
It's almost like an icebreaker.
Yeah, it's kind of like lightens the mood a little bit.
As much as you don't
breaks the
want
ice,
to
gets everyone to laugh.
you just can't help it though. No matter how stupid it is, most of the time you crack a smile at the very least. So 100%. We have a quote at work.
Dad jokes are in their prime right now.
Yeah.
They are premium comedy.
We have a quote at work. I forget who says it, but it's where there is little laughter, there is little success. And I think dad jokes can be a direct correlation to that, just in the workforce, because it's that balance. It helps keep people
I like
stable.
Especially in a high stress environment. 100%.
True.
Let's talk about high stress, high stress environments. James LaGamma, a little bit about your history. You got your Stetson football shirt on. You're an athlete, right? Kickers are athletes too. Let's talk about your journey.
For the brand, baby.
For Pat McAfee, for the brand. Let's talk about, it's such a unique position, the kicker, right? You're someone who maybe a lot of people look at a football team and they're like, they got to make a joke about someone. It's usually about the kicker or the punter. And that was you. So how did you wake up and decide, kicking's the route for me? How did we go down this athletic journey, and how did we land here? Let's start and let's tell the people about that.
I mean, to be blunt, it's not a miraculous story. I played soccer for 12 years. That's kind of my first sport that I started out with. And then I wanted to kind of change it up, do something different. So I can't remember the full story on like why I actually started to play football. I know my dad played football in high school, so naturally, he was excited. But they used to claim that they pulled me off the soccer field, saw me kicking the like a goal kick or something like that. We're like, oh, this kid's got a leg, let's bring him on. And back then in Little League, kids couldn't kick farther than like 10 yards, 20 yards. I mean, we were in 6th, 7th grade. So yeah, I just tried out for football. I didn't just play kicker in Little League. I played a lot of other positions, running back, wide receiver, DB, basically all the skill positions.
Whoa.
I had a little bit more speed, like it kind of came in handy. But yeah, no, kicking was always something that I enjoyed. I was good at, and naturally, when you're good at something, you tend to pursue it. And so I kind of fizzled out of soccer, where obviously everything was, kicking a soccer ball. Now I'm just kicking a football. And I had a lot of fun doing it.
Very nice. Is that that transition you got into high school? Obviously, we know college, like it was just football. High school, were you a dual sport athlete? Was it just kind of football all the way, just as kicker? What was kind of a little bit of the context there? I mean, you went to St. Thomas Aquinas powerhouse, so what was that like?
I feel like that's kind of the answer in itself, right? I went to St. Thomas, so it's hard to compete in other positions. So, and it's almost a full-time job there. I wasn't, a dual sport person at that time anyways. I kind of strictly was playing football. I did try out for the soccer team, but didn't make it, so it was fine. And I just put all my focuses on kicking, but I did not play any other position because everyone else there was phenomenal at their role on the team. Very few people played not only more than one position, potentially on one side of the ball, but rarely played on both sides of the balls, which I know a lot of people in high school will play both sides of the ball. So you kind of stuck to one position and you honed in on your craft there. So that's naturally what I did with kicking. And funny enough, I actually had 3 kicking coaches at St. Thomas, which vastly changed when I went to college. But I predominantly did place kicking in high school for the first few years. It wasn't until my senior year that I transitioned to doing more punting and shared a little bit of time with place kicking. Kickoffs weren't really my thing. I just didn't have the biggest leg as I got older. So it kind of fizzled out on that. But punting was something I just enjoyed so much, and I still enjoyed it. If I were to keep playing football, I would probably go for being a punter rather than a place kicker. Less stress on a punter than there is a place kicker.
True. Very true.
That is very true. I've got a question, James. So you talk about stress on a kicker, and obviously being in that setting, being in the environment where all eyes are on the kicker at some point, right? You have the weight of the entire team, a stadium looking at you. I mean, shoot, you kicked in the Dallas Cowboys stadium, right? Like, pretty cool stuff.
That's awesome.
You also have the opportunity to be the hero, on the flip side, the villain, right? Or the person who just failed. I guess, obviously, we love you. We do respect the kickers. We respect the punters. We respect the brand. But what I think we all really, really like and really enjoy and really understand from your sake is, how does one kind of cope with that pressure when you're in the moment? Because I think it's incredible to be able to deal with that type of stress and anxiety, to be honest.
Yeah. I've only actually been put in that situation once, where it was to win the game. It was Little League, and it took us to the Super Bowl. Okay. We lost said Super Bowl. Miserably. I think we got like 2 first downs. It was awful. It came out of nowhere. But we were a powerhouse that year. I think, Ryan, it was the year before you guys won it. But let me tell you, and it's funny because I put Tanner. Oh yeah, 100%.
Oh shit!
It was a 40-yard field goal. Pee Wee football. That's big time. I was in 7th grade. Hilarious. But no, I rarely have I been put in that position because once I got into high school, the competition was just a little different. We were really good, and we were putting up 40 to 50 to 60 points a game. There really wasn't times where there was a field goal riding on me. Very few. I've had a couple of opportunities where maybe an onside kick was happening, and that kind of has a similar pressure to it.
True.
And then in college, it's unfortunate, but we sucked. You know,
We'll get there about
60
how
points
bad
the
we
other
were
way.
in college. Jeez.
Let's cut that.
Listen, man, sometimes you got to be honest with yourself. And wasn't too many seasons where we went even close to 500. I think we had one that was close. But again, because of that situation, we really didn't have many field goals. It actually calls me to one thing where Lydia, actually, before I even met her, my wife, put a Snapchat out there when I kicked a field goal against San Diego. And it was a long field goal, too. I think it was like a 40-plus, and I missed it. And we were losing, I think, 40 or 50 to 0. And then she posted, can't even make a field goal. Damn.
Little did she know that was
hurts.
her future.
Oh, God.
Yeah, that was her future husband.
Oh,
but no,
shit.
and then someone went on there and was like, "Take that down. That's bad." But I mean, I've heard it all over the place. I've seen kickers get death threats. I've seen, kickers having to carry a gun around on campus in some of these colleges because they're scared, like legit.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen kickers though also come off of a couch because the other kickers got hurt and balled out.
Yeah.
It's really hard to say when it comes to coping with the stress. I kind of bring it down to like two main factors. You're in a game situation. I feel like you guys probably have the similar concepts maybe in your positions, but you practice so much that you rely on that practice to become muscle memory. And so when you get up there, you just react.
Yeah.
I mean, kicking is very fundamental. It's no different than golf. Your foot is literally the golf club. Okay. So if anyone ever wants to complain about a kicker again, they can realize, oh, how you do on the golf course. If you do well, then fuck me. But anyways, then you kind of go to your fundamentals. The way I've always approached it though is you want to focus on like 2 to 3 things at most that day. Like you kind of go through your warm-ups, you figure out where you're kicking, how things are going, when, that kind of stuff. And you kind of focus on 2 things that you're like, okay, this is the things that I need to focus in on, I key in on, that's it. If you worry about a million things, everything's going to go wrong. It had happened to me every single time. So I always find that 2 to 3 controllables is always the best way to go to be most successful. But another thing that I did too that I think kind of layers into this topic is breathing techniques. So when you do get nervous or excited or anxious or stressed out, one of my coaches actually gave me a breathing technique, which it was pretty simple. It was just 2 big inhales, hold and exhale, nice and long. And for some reason, he told me to like make a triangle with my hand and kind of just focus in on that. And then it kind of just made everything go away. You kind of block out the noise and you're able to just go out there and do your thing. Like you don't hear the heckling that's on the field and all that stuff. But I've realized recently that breathing techniques has been a big thing in the mental health discussions. One of the ones that have been going around a lot on social media lately is the Wim Hof breathing technique. And it's pretty intense from what I understand. I've never tried it. It's not the longest thing, but there's a lot of holding of your breath and you can pass out. So they always say, make sure you're in a controlled environment when you do it. But I've heard great things about it.
Love that.
It's interesting that you say that you haven't had that many case scenarios where you've been in a position where you've had to come into like this clutch scenario. Mm-hmm. I feel like many times you see professional athletes, especially in at the NFL, you see kickers having to come to the stage pretty frequently. It's like a frequent thing in their season. Now, of course, there's there's sometimes where there's one circumstance that helps them win a game or whatnot, but like if they're having a difficult season, the kicker is one of the most crucial players.
Mm-hmm.
And they continue to be that most crucial player. And you can see a trend sometimes with these seasons. And it's surprising between, you hit what, Pop Warner football, college football, high school football, all these games. I mean, dozens and dozens and dozens of games when you haven't had that situation. So that's pretty unique.
Had it once, but yeah. I mean, every kick is still a pressure kick because most of the time, if you think about it from like where are we at on the scoreboard, maybe that field goal puts us just above the team that we're playing against. So maybe it's like that. We're 7-7. This puts us at 10. But it's never been a game ending is kind of what I want to put on the stage there for. So, but there's still every kick's a pressure kick.
Let me ask you.
And one other thing that I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to say.
Well, one other thing.
Go, Kenny. I'm going to shut the fuck up.
Well, one other thing that I was thinking about is like kickers are it's an interesting position because, from a DB perspective or a tight end or wide receiver perspective, they get rotated out pretty frequently because of their level of activity. One, they're running pretty aggressively. They can be running pretty hot, or an injury can happen because, just the nature of the game. And if that happens to a kicker, that could be like crucial to a team's season. Like, you have a kicker and you don't have 5 kickers deep in most cases. Like the kicker is really unique and they're really leaning on that kicker for his health, for the longevity of the season. But they know that with high impact positions, the likelihood of something happening is there. Mm-hmm. So the reason why I bring this up is because you've been in case scenarios and we've been fortunate to meet one of your, I would say, your duo in high school. And he's become a great friend of ours as well. So you had this like duo in high school with Nolan, and then in college you had others that you shared experiences with and kind of had, I would say, a dual kind of role in your in your position in both facets. So how do you deal with that? Because I think that at any moment, a kicker's at risk of like, bench him or take him out. Where a DB slips up and you see him ride, or a wide receiver slips up and you see him ride. The kicker's a little bit different. It's not the same.
Yeah, there's usually less of us on the team too, right? We're not as deep of a position, and we don't travel heavy either. So if a kicker were to go down on the road, usually you bring a kicker and a punter. Hopefully they are versatile enough to do both. And then after that, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel. I mean, I've seen linemen kick. I've seen quarterbacks. I've seen a whole bunch. Yeah, holders will get in there and kick. I mean, hell, I was a holder for a few years. But yeah, it's interesting. I've actually been in a couple of case scenarios too, where with all these other kickers and punters and stuff that I've played with, where I've rotated with them, actually very similarly to a cornerback and or receiver or running backs. We're splitting time. Which is not really heard of in the kicking position. You're usually either benched or you're kicking full season because you want the kicker to build confidence. To rotate them is like, a huge confidence shock. And it's like, well, I thought I was doing good, but now I got to wait for my next kick because I'm in rotation. It's a little odd. It fostered competitive drive though. So, I mean, at the end of the day, when I was in these situations, I always picked team over me. Whoever's the best player should be on the field. And I think mostly everyone thinks that way, but they won't, show off that way because you have to have that confidence. You want to fight for your position, all that stuff. And I'm not saying you don't do that. I'm just saying, by putting team before me, if you work hard, then the person in front of you has to work harder to keep their spot. And it just makes the team better. And so that was kind of my mantra when I was going through this. However, I may have took it a step further that could be a little bit different. And I actually would help the other kicker if they're going through some problems. Just because if the other one's starting that week, I'm not starting. I might not be traveling. We got to make sure that we're making these field goals, right? We didn't really have kicking coaches in college, so I had to kind of step up in that regard. But I mean, when I was in high school with Nolan, though, since you brought him up, I mean, that was probably the most interesting thing ever. I mean, talk about a weird mental battle, because he ends up being one of my best friends, still to this day. I mean, we're talking about 15 plus years now.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult.
But it kind of goes back to that phrase. It breeded healthy competition. Like we genuinely wanted the best for each other, but then we also had to compete with each other. So when he was doing well and I wasn't, I either had to find other ways and or had to try to continue to better myself. It actually kind of led me into punting a little bit. And I got really good at it really fast, was able to transition. And then it kind of made that playing time situation probably a little less stressful and kind of that competition between one of your best friends. At least that's the way I see it. It kind of helped a little bit. But again, at the end of the day, I was always Nolan's biggest fan on the sideline. When he went out there on the field, I was always rooting for him. I was always right there at the kick. I was always telling him, keeping his two focal points or whatever, like, hey, keep your head down, make sure you're doing that. Because maybe that was the thing we focused on warm-ups or whatever. But, it is what it is. And then at Stetson, the two guys, Grant Fogel, that I kind of most of my competition was against, they ended up being our fraternity. And so, there's still a relationship there. It wasn't like these guys were, just acquaintances. I mean, yeah, they were teammates and, you don't always have to get along with your teammates, but still, there's times when you feel like you're more deserving to be out there. But at the end of the day, you can't throw yourself a pity party, right? The more you kind of sulk in that, you kind of have to have that almost that moment of solitude and reflection. And you kind of go back to the drawing board. And then what I would do is basically go key in on the fundamentals again. That's usually what always helped me get back onto the field and or just get my shit in order. And then kind of grow from there once I've got the fundamentals back down and put myself in the position to play again. So
Makes sense. It is difficult, but I didn't think of the position with Grant Fogel. It is unique because Nolan you were really close with, and then you kind of fell into a very similar situation in college with. And kickers are also in a weird place too because they're like off to the side doing their own fucking thing in practice.
We gotta find our own.
They stick together. Yeah, they stick together. So you guys are hanging out in a different capacity no matter what. Whereas DBs or wide receivers, you go do your thing and then you come back as a defense or as the offensive side and you're working together with other team members. So it's a little bit different. I mean, you're in a really unique situation there. So it's cool to see you foster. And you know what? It's really cool to see how close you are with Nolan still to this day. And both of you went to amazing colleges and did your thing there. And,
and he's an amazing kicker. Like he's really, really fucking good. He just took off senior year and then in college he was so fucking good. He had some hip problems and I know injuries always hurt people. I mean, shit, I broke my neck and all that kind of stuff too. And I hurt my back in high school as well, which hurt my position and how I was able to play. So, I mean, it all happens, but yeah.
Cool. Yeah, interesting stuff.
I think, Kenny, you kind of have said the term a couple of times. This context we're getting from James, it is unique because you think about sports, you think about football, one of the most grueling, physically tasked sports out there. But I don't think a lot of people think about that from the kicker position, right? I think a lot of people, and James, you correct me if we're wrong, it is more mental because you see it can go from being on top of the world where you're the best kicker in the league and it can fall off a cliff real fast, real quick. And I think there was a kicker from Florida State, Robert Aguayo, got drafted in the second round, which is unheard of for a college kicker going to NFL, comes in with all this hype, missed a couple kicks, that rookie season and was never the same, could never recover. And it wasn't like he became a bad kicker. It wasn't like his fundamentals, from a physique standpoint, he lost everything. It was all in his head. So I think it's just interesting. We get to kind of go inside your head a little bit and inside your experiences with that and understand it from a different angle. But I think at least in my analysis, I think St. Thomas Aquinas and going to a high school like that, was able to teach you a lot of lessons early on, because here you are in a competition for a position that typically doesn't have a competition, but you're looking at everyone around you, and the difference between starting and bench warmer was minimal. So you're getting to see that every single day, and you're seeing the success, you're seeing state championships and all those types of things. And I think that really propelled you for college, because in college, I think you were one of the mentally toughest people we had on the team. I don't think a lot of people knew that, though, because you had to battle against complacency every day. You said this. You had 3 kicking coaches in high school. You didn't have any in college. So you really could have done whatever you wanted. No one would have known what. No one would have batted an eye in practice. It was just, can he make the kicks or not? So I guess, how did you handle that? Just your attitude, your approach from, all that structure to now you're in college. You don't really have anyone watching you. And how did you battle every day with complacency and, I'll give a little bit of effort, but you did it. You pushed yourself each and every day to be your best. And I think people saw that. And I think people had a lot of respect for you as a result of that. So can you just maybe take us down that path a little bit?
Yeah. And first thing I'd like to say about some of the comments that you've made is, if you're a kicker and I'm drafting on fantasy football, you will be drafted in the higher rounds. I'm just saying that right now. It carries on. All right. For the brand. But, a lot of different things come to mind when we're talking about this. So as far as complacency, I'll hit on that first. In sports as well as in life, sports is very translatory. I don't know if that's a word. Translates well into life. You are the only one that can determine how much effort is being put in to reach whatever goals or what you're willing to give, essentially, right? And so as a kicker, with all that time on my hands at practice, with no one to tell me what to do except, hey, at minute, what do we used to go up to 240 sometimes at practice, like 190, you're going to have to do some field goal practice. I mean, I got to get warmed up for that and all that stuff. But what am I doing for the rest of the day? So, you just have to know what you want, and you need to work for it. So like, I could be the lazy kicker, and I could have went into the locker room and hung out, played video games, or went to, just stretching all day long. I mean, then you become too flexible, and then the kicks don't work out well. So instead we worked on little drills. We basically planned out our entire practice. I worked a lot with this long snappers, but being mindful that I couldn't kick so many balls to where I would just have dead leg, and then I couldn't perform that week. So you had to be strategic and smart and do a lot of mental reps, actually, which is kind of strange. But the more you do mental reps, I mean, now I can 10x how many reps I've actually done, right? I think there's a couple of people who have talked about doing mental reps before. But I think one of the things that benefited me most is I was very I worked hard at finding different ways or different angles or changing things up to try to progress. We used to do plyometrics. We used to work on our core, on our rotations. We would do certain trainings in practice, as well as kind of focused in on hip explosion and generating fast twitch muscle fibers, which is why I did a lot of ladder work and stuff like that. So that way I could take my role, my position that much further to compete against everybody else. And by changing things up, I was able to kind of really learn and hone in on the craft. Kind of made me into a halfway decent coach too. I could see things a little bit different. And then, watching film and getting all that information and all that stuff together, we were able to plan out the week on how we would approach it. Place kicking on Monday, punting on Tuesday, kickoffs on Wednesday, et cetera, et cetera. But having that different way of thinking sometimes creates better results. Sometimes it doesn't, and you just have to kind of evaluate. So it was a lot of trial and error. I feel like I was doing like the scientific method constantly out in the field. But again, you have to practice with intensity. I'm watching all of you guys bust your ass out there, and I'm just sitting on the fucking sideline holding chains sometimes. Like it's a little embarrassing to say, but I had to go find things to do. So it was also combating some boredom, but it is what it is. So we put ourselves in a lot of situations. I remember one game we had such crazy wind that I couldn't drop the punt very well. So what I ended up doing was I had Kevin, our equipment manager, I had him pull out the fucking giant ass fan and put that shit right in front of me so that way I can try different angles of dropping when there's high wind so I can get better at controlling the ball when I'm trying to punt the ball. Because if I have a 10-yard punt and we're on the goal line, we're screwed. That team's going to have prime time real estate. They can either kick the field goal or get the touchdown and then take over. So long-winded, but that's basically it. I mean, other than that, the mental battle that you have with the game, I mean, you just have to have a short memory. And I think that kind of goes on with life as well. If you get frustrated with something, you need to have a short memory and just kind of go on to the next thing. The next kick is a new kick. The next task is a new task. You're not always going to be perfect, but you can try to develop skills and fundamentals, muscle memory, and all that kind of stuff to be good.
So it's interesting that you broke all this down, because I think Ryan, Kenny, and myself, of course, can all agree that you are one of the most credible people when it comes to battling mental toughness and fighting that complacency, right? I think you do all the actions and things to perfect your craft. And I think that's a testimony to you. And I would like to almost pivot and ask you a question that I think a lot of what you just explained, the buildup and being the best at what you can be, even though you were dealing with difficult variables. We were going into a year, we had a season where we were doing pretty well, and things were kicking, things were screaming, and you had a traumatic event. It doesn't even seem real sometimes when we talk about it now, and your positivity always makes a joke out of it, but I would like you to kind of break down and just really share with us a little bit about the incident where, and you did tackle the man very well. You jacked him up.
I didn't tackle him well, but I hit him hard.
Passion check and breaking necks, all right? You ended up breaking your neck in San Diego.
Yeah.
Just walk us through your thoughts of one, finding out the news, how it even happened, and then really the road to recovery, and then just really ending the following season as a senior.
We've had a previous podcast where I went into the details of the actual injury and like how it all transpired. So I won't go too in depth on that. But for any new listeners, basically, fourth play of the game, we're early. It's maybe 2 minutes in, nothing like that crazy. We go 4 and out. I go hit the punt. Sideline tackle has to happen. I ended up, instead of shooting my head across his body, I put my head right into his body. Broke my neck, didn't know it. It dislocated C6 and fractured C5. It actually was very similar to the guy on the Brahmas, or what's the what is that, semi-pro football? It's not the
UFL, United Football League, with the Rock.
UFL, is that what it is now? Very similar tackle, just on a punt compared to a kickoff. But we didn't know that I broke my neck. So there was a lot of figuring out what the hell's going on the sideline. I'm like, something doesn't feel right. I hit him with my so-called left shoulder, but I'm feeling it on my right shoulder. What's going on here? Equilibrium is off. I can't walk straight. I start to get that back towards the end. And basically, they take my shoulder pads off, tell me I'm not going back in the game, and I put a neck brace on me for precaution. Well, I didn't get carted off the field, went to the hospital, walked myself in with the cleats on, straight through the front door of the hospital. Could have slipped, could have made this thing a lot worse. But yeah, I kind of had no idea what was going on. I was still in the game. I was still like wanting to know where we were at. San Diego is a big game for us because everyone always wanted to topple them over in our era of playing. But for some reason, it didn't affect me mentally as much as maybe someone would think. Like it was a junior. I was a junior at the time, as you kind of pointed out, Johnny. I came back for my senior year. But I don't know. I just think my normal, like, joking self was able to focus on positivity and kind of the people around me. And, I accepted it early on that I knew this was a serious injury. And by no means am I undermining the severity of it at all. I mean, hell, they went in through the front of my neck. I've got a little scar up here. I mean, the surgery sounded gruesome. My mom was freaking out. She was all the way across the country, and I'm just sitting there telling her like, nah, you're good. I'm all right. You don't have to come. Like I felt fine. I didn't really feel pain, and maybe that's part of it. Maybe it was the adrenaline. I don't know. But I think it's because I knew things were out of my control that I just let them happen, and then I just took them one step at a time. I didn't really harp on the fact that I was injured. I didn't let it kind of become a burden. And in my head, for some reason, deep down, I knew I was coming back. I knew I was in good hands. I had a great doctor. I think it was at Sharp Medical out in San Diego. And, I just took this to next step after next step after next step. It was first, all right, I got to get surgery. And then it was, okay, we're going to fly home. Got to get in and out first. Like that's kind of the lighthearted mental approach that I took. Instead of being down and out and pissed off, like, dang it, my season's done. Like the team is set up in a way to carry on without me. Same thing at work too, right? You could be sick one day and the team should be set up in a way for it to carry on. So I knew I was in good hands. So now I had to change and take on a different role. And I needed to be that guy that could help the other guys on the team work harder, push themselves, but from just me kind of being more of a coach or just there on the sideline with them. I made it to every practice except for one, right? And I just took the rehab and every step along the way as I needed to, kind of just stayed happy the entire time. It wasn't like a magical thing. I feel like there is some choice in your mood and your emotions, and I just chose to be positive. So, did I answer every question you had there, Johnny? I think you're on mute there, my friend.
I am on mute. My apologies. Yes, you answered everything, and I think the main focus is you just had to be positive, which I think is very critical and important. So, appreciate you sharing that.
I think
makes sense.
It's a great takeaway, man, because as someone who, and it's been referenced before, I feel like I dealt with depression going through an injury. And you had you broke your neck. You couldn't fucking turn your shoulders you couldn't turn your neck without moving your entire shoulder. Like you had every reason to come up with an excuse to sulk, to have a bad outlook, and you didn't. And I think that's one. I think if anyone watches this, and that's the biggest takeaway is just no matter your situation, you control your outlook. And as a guy in a neck brace, you're trying to do college. You're trying to figure that out. You mentioned you're in a fraternity, you're on a football team, and then you have a fucking broken neck. Like you could have thrown in the towel right there. Nobody would have said a word. No one would have judged you for it or anything. And yet there were times where, and then you're the guy picking people up. You're the guy who's finding a way to look at the positive side of things. And you look at this guy who's trying to be this positive person. It's like, dude's in a freaking neck brace. And it's inspiring, man. So I just want to say thank you. You were a light for me. You were probably a light for a lot of people. And And I hope that anyone who does hear this, it helps them take a step back. And you always hear things aren't as bad as they seem. They're also not as good as they seem. But I think, your experience is a great example of just how your mental outlook, that mental fortitude, you control, how you approach things. And you can't get a better example than a guy who broke his neck. I mean, you met your wife with a broken
Yeah, I
neck.
did.
It doesn't get much better than that.
No. I mean, again, there's things that you can do to kind of help you stay in that positive mindset and not go into that dark hole. I mean, simply put, like, you can do things that make you happy. You have a lot of extra time when you're injured, or if you're going through something, right? You can key in on things like, hey, I know this makes me happy. I'm gonna go do that, elevate my mood, and then it carries on, right? And then you can kind of carry out that day a little bit happier. I mean, I remember Adam and I we were both hurt at the same time. And so we played video games together. We played a whole career. Like, while everyone's on traveling, we're getting status updates, like, how's the team doing? How's everyone prepared for the game? And actually, I think that was our best season too. Was when I wasn't playing. Correlation, I think not. But we were both hurt, and we got to do something that was fun and kind of lighthearted, and got us out of that funk. But to that point too, it's like you want to be around people, right? Be around the people that you love. They help you get through things, right? And so, like, I had all you guys. I could lean in on the fraternity. I was able to lean in on my family. I was able to lean in on the team. And that helps. You got the training staff and all that stuff going on. I mean, you just kind of have to trust the process. And that can go for anything. It doesn't have to be my specific scenario. If you trust the process, and engage with professionals or whatever the situation may call, you can enjoy it rather than just sulk in it. It it doesn't all have to be fun and games, right? There's definitely some hard work that needs to get put into it, but there is fun stuff happening in your life, and if you just let all the sadness kind of creep in, not only does it affect you, but it affects people around you. Then people don't want to be around you, and then it's harder for you to get through it with others. So again, you kind of have to position yourself, be patient, take those incremental successes as they come, as they compound into just major steps forward, or else you can just keep spiraling out of control. And that's what no one wants for anybody in any situation that's hard. Break things down, do things that make you happy. Those kind of things make a huge impact when you're going through stuff.
No, that makes sense. And you've seen it in many different case scenarios, but more so because of obviously a unique injury that many people don't experience. You have the ability to go through more challenges than I would say the average, just because of your perspective. So your unique view has definitely allowed, and your mentality has allowed you to push forward. And I think that um, that doesn't only lead like on and off the football field. We've been talking about that a lot, and I think that mentality, and I have seen it in the business world a lot, but the mentality of that athlete that you begin to cultivate as a young person, and you get these morals and characteristics instilled into you from an early age that you continue to use and leverage through your athletic career for many years. It becomes such a big part of you that drives you in many facets of life. Um, and it has for me, and I know for a fact that it has for many athletes. But do you use that same mentality off the field and in different circumstances, whether it be business or family or relationship, friends, anything?
Yeah. I think the ability to react well when you're facing a mental battle or facing adversity kind of comes from built up resilience, right?
Yeah.
Something that you develop over time. I mean, Resilience is basically just being flexible and responding in changing situations, right? So, I mean, through parenting, teaching, coaching, friendships, my environment as a whole, it's kind of pushed me into this mode of thinking more positive, having flexibility, creative thoughts and processes and behaviors that it kind of allows me to almost just be ready to face any obstacle that may come in my way. There's something I can pull from any of those factors in life, where maybe it came from football and then I transitioned it into something that happened in life, in personal life, that I can take that step back and kind of evaluate and see, okay, maybe from like a non-biased perspective, what's going on here, and then kind of evaluate and choose to be positive, laugh, smile, and kind of lean into that, right? Life's going to throw you a bunch of obstacles. You have to have the ability to kind of like let it go, know that it's not in your control. Don't let those things define you, and definitely don't let it inhibit who you actually are. So kind of like that's the mantra that I have is when something bad happens, don't let it define you, right? Be who you are. Um, and when difficult times strike, you want to be able to show up. And so once you have that mental clarity again, you can kind of show up and be strong for others, or yourself. And although you may not have the answers, you kind of slow down, you take that breath, you ask the questions, you listen a little bit, you kind of learn through every situation that gets thrown at you. Maybe hard to keep a level head at times, but again, kind of comes back to going through things with people. You're never really alone. And so you kind of, again, you can be present with family and friends and support groups or whatever. Talking about it, I think, has actually been the most help for me when I'm going through something. I know, you guys have been there for me in a lot of my personal battles. And it helps to have those trusting people to be able to talk to, because then you can kind of, get it off your chest, have that ability to move forward and move on in a positive direction.
Yeah, I like what you said there. I think that's something that comes to mind when you said that that others are likely going through the things that you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I learned this in sports early on, and probably you did too, but it's like the chance that you're going through something that no one else has ever experienced is like excessively minimal. Like even in the most difficult hurdles, whether it be personal or it might be a group thing or business or family or friends, like someone else has gotten through that. And it is about finding guidance and seeking someone that might be able to shed light on their way through that circumstance. Because one of the best ways to be educated to move forward through something is not just being educated in and of itself, but it's by talking with someone who has experience in it. And I think that's what you've been really good at kind of, I would say, living in the present, understanding um, the experiences that you've acquired, and then like really truly putting to work and living the things that you have experienced based off of your past. Meaning you experience something in a football game and you're like, oh wow, right? It probably isn't the best thing to freak out about this case scenario because we have 7 seconds left on the clock. Like me freaking out isn't going to get the job done, but me being more strategic and more structured to do so will maybe get the job done. And then you're really good at applying those things and using it as like leverage to move forward. So I applaud you for that. That's something that I've seen, especially you keeping your composure in circumstances that don't call for composure. And dealing with Ryan sometimes is difficult.
I was going to say dealing with you sometimes is difficult in terms of composure. I think you and I can agree that we have the least composure out of the 4 people on this call. We'll let James and Johnny duke out who has the most. But I think you and I.
Yeah, but he didn't have to live me. He didn't have to live with me.
That's
He had to live
true.
with
We
you.
don't have to get into those discussions. But I will say, living with James, we've spent a lot of time together, right? And you hit on it, James. Being able to step back, be a mediator, really hear people out. I think that's a great takeaway for individuals because we all deal with problems, whether it's family, it's friends, whatever. There has to be that person that has that balanced mindset, and I think you're that for us, which is awesome. Certainly not me. It's certainly not Kenny. But I think one thing that goes, I don't know if it goes unnoticed, and sometimes it might be stress that you put on yourself. But you love vacations. You love bringing everyone together, but that comes with that can come with stress. That can bring, opinions. And we have a large friend group. We've talked about that, and you do a great job of wanting to manifest moments to bring everyone together. Whether it's your lake house, it's a cruise, it's whatever trip. So, what's kind of the thought process on your approach to being there for everyone, right? By when you schedule these events, you always find a way to ensure that everyone is taken care of. And I'm just genuinely intrigued because the amount of time and effort and thought process on planning and saying, well, Johnny loves to do this. Let's make sure we build that into the trip. Well, Kenny loves this. We're going to make sure that we have time for that. I mean, you find a way and probably overextend yourself a lot to try to make everyone happy. And that takes a lot of effort. So where does that come from? Why do you put yourself through that stress? And then how do you manage through it?
I mean, naturally I gravitate to be around people and to surround myself around people, right? It always picks up the mood. And no matter what, any day of the week, if you're feeling down, and you gave someone a call or you got around with a group of friends, your mood always elevates after that, right? So by building these events and making sure everybody's happy, to your point, I never really, I guess, truly plan it by myself. Sometimes we've planned things with committee where there's a couple of us and we can kind of figure out what do we want to do. But a lot of the times it's just getting feedback. You can ask people hey, what do you guys think about these options? And then after deliberation, someone has to make a decision. And so then you just kind of you make the decision that gives the group the most opportunity for enjoyment. But I think the way of looking at it to kind of make everyone happy or they're not wasting their money going on this trip or doing this thing, right? Which is usually the top of mind for me is I don't want people to waste their money, their hard-earned money, their time. Those are 2 things that are very hard to come by. And so I want everyone to have fun when they're getting together with everyone else. There's always some element of whatever we're doing as a group that someone will find enjoyment in. You can take anything, or you can put a spin on something, anything at all. And someone's going to have something that they like about that thing, a little element of it. And it may actually expose them to the whole thing in its entirety. I can use golf. I can use going out onto the lake or whatever. I mentioned Adam earlier. We'll harp on him for a second here. Adam doesn't like bodies of water. He's not comfortable in that area. So when he comes to Lake Placid, we go and we kind of post up at the sandbar. So he's not in deep water. He can see the bottom, and then he can still enjoy himself. Yeah, he still, wants to drink and have fun and stuff. And I think that ends up edging off his mood a little bit there. But that kind of put him in a position to where he can have enjoyment and have fun. And then he's doing the thing that he likes to do is hanging out, drinking with friends, whatever stuff that we're doing in there, listening to music. We could be playing spike ball, volleyball, whatever. There's so many things you can bring to the table to add a different element to the task at hand or whatever thing you're going to be doing. But, not every time are you going to actually make everyone happy, right? And I think you have to come in with that mindset as well. And so the way I look at it is people love three things. It's very simple when it comes to doing stuff. They like food, they like laughing, and they like being around people that they love. It's pretty easy. The event itself is just a vessel. The memories make themselves. We all get together and we create those memories. It's not the actual thing that we're doing. It's however we're acting when we're having fun and hanging out and doing things together, laughing, jokes and stuff, that makes the memory. It's not that, oh, I did this really cool thing. It's, man, we were like 40 of us together. We had a great time. We were all doing this together. It all came together and it was just a blast.
I love it. I think you've put together some really great events, James. Give yourself a pat on the back. All right. I know you're trying to say a lot of us chip in and chime in and help out, but 97% of the time it's you. So we appreciate you and
Not all the time.
including us sometimes on the committee where we chime in a little bit. Just delegation, right?
That's we, not I, man.
Yeah. So as someone who does not handle stress the best, I've got a question for you to kind of close us out here. It's like, what are some of the tactics or what are some of the things that you're doing or I know you're a big individual who likes to learn, right? What are some of the things that you've taken from an approach standpoint or really looked into that help you with your stress management as a whole?
Yeah. Actually, I think you helped me with one thing, Johnny, specifically. Yeah. You kind of put a term to something that maybe I was trying to practice,
Okay.
but that's, seeking to understand. So when you're stressed out, if you kind of take that step back and self-reflection, you can assess your situation and then create a plan to kind of lay it all out there and be like, all right, I can tackle this now. It doesn't seem as daunting. Right. As well as if it's just like something new too, you can still take that step back. And then again, plan to choose that positive outlook. I've looked into the breathing techniques. I really like the breathing techniques. I think they're great. I've done a lot of the breathing techniques now in the mornings to kind of set myself up for the day. Usually I'll do that kind of prior to going into like the ice plunge or something like that. Or if I do like meditation or stretching or mobility work or whatever. I think the breathing techniques they really kind of get you in the right mindset. We've talked about it before on the podcast. I think when you're in a high stress environment, doing something hard can kind of wake you up and get you into a better mental state. Doing something physical or mental kind of combats what's going on. Even though you're going through something hard, if you step away from it, do something else that's equally as hard, you'll come back and realize this isn't actually that hard. I think Kenny, when we were talking about this, you mentioned how you'd get on like an hour Peloton bike ride. That's a mental and physical battle. And then when you get done with it, you feel good. You're ready to attack whatever is ahead of you. As I mentioned before, focusing on like things that you can control. That's huge. Don't try to control everything. That might actually add more stress to you. Take on the little small things. It's kind of part of that plan and execute portion. Small things before you expand to the bigger things. Let them compound a little bit. Going back to your fundamentals. Back as I mentioned when I was kicking, when you're going through hard times, you can't figure something out. Go back to the fundamentals. Try different angles. You never know. Different thought processes. Do some research. Whatever. A different way of thinking. Go talk to a colleague and be like, hey, I'm having this problem. Can you help me out here? There's people that will help you through things. So I think seeking help, seeking to understand, self-reflection, all these things can really help you in a stressful environment. But at the end of the day, you gotta kind of let some things go a little bit. Try not to hold on so tight and be yourself.
It's awesome, James. Just thank you, man. Thank you for kind of taking us down this path, taking us down your journey, your experiences. I know we hit a lot on football, which is just interesting because that's probably the thing you least want to tie yourself to, with, Johnny and I, Kenny with the sports stuff. But, again, that perspective is just so unique. So thank you. To kind of send us off, for anyone watching this, anyone following this, what's maybe your message to anyone from a mental health standpoint, and just what's your message to those folks who are going through tough times, or going through those ups and downs that we all face in the normal day to day?
Yeah. I don't really claim to be a master of mental health. I'm not an industry professional at all, but I think all of us are able to reflect on situations in our lives and kind of draw some conclusions from them on your mental capacities. You can learn a lot from self-evaluation and basically just continue to grow. Life is always going to have obstacles. You're always going to have to try to overcome them, and it gets hard at times. So when it does get hard, I guess the biggest thing I could say as a takeaway from here is 3 words. Just reach out and say, or 4 words. I need your help. Not I need help is where I was going with it before, but we make it more personal. Go reach out to a person, a group of people, support groups, people that have gone through similar or like situations that you're going through, and you'll be able to get through it on the other side. There's always light at the end of the tunnel. Just take those small steps and be yourself throughout the whole process.
Awesome. Well, thank you, James. We appreciate it. And
if only Johnny could have.
I don't think Johnny's
if only Johnny could have heard that, right?
Johnny's like, I don't need this.
I know.
Hopefully, I didn't bore him like I did Garth in previous episodes. I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for letting me chime in here.
Of course.
Awesome. Well, until next time.
Bender continues.
Bender continues, Johnny.
Great.